Hey, Greg here. Did you know that I've created a few walking tours of Bangkok? Using the GPS on your phone, the routes take you through some of my favorite areas of the city, exploring the fascinating neighborhoods and hidden history that give Bangkok its sweet, sweet mojo. Head to voicemap.me and search for Bangkok. On part 1 of 2, we welcome back Paul and Yuangrat Wedel to talk about their historical fiction novels set in Southern Thailand.
So if you're interested in good stories well told and the dramatic changes that took place in Thailand during the turn of the 20th century, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to teach the iconic Canadian sport of curling, but has yet to find the right broom and plastic shoe combo to let me start practicing.
Yeah, that's gonna be a rough thing to make work in Thailand, but good luck.
Thanks, man. I told my students when I was teaching, I told them about curling, and they didn't believe me. Straight up didn't believe me. They thought I was making it up. I had to show them photos that it was a real thing.
It is a bit of an odd sport.
Yeah.
And I met Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a 1-year teaching contract 23 years ago, fell in love with trying to find a way to wave down a taxi that always works. And I'm still trying, so I never left.
You just jump right in front of it.
Honestly, like that, I mean, it's funny you said that because I actually have done that on occasion. I've come to the conclusion that, and what's your take on this? I think it's more annoying when a taxi has its light on that says they're free and they don't even stop for you, as opposed to one that stops but then won't go where you want to go on the meter. I think when they just pass you by, it's an even greater insult.
Yeah, interesting. I think it all depends on your perspective, because what I do if they pass me by, I'm like, well, who knows? Maybe he's off. Maybe his daughter's giving birth at the hospital right now. He's in a hurry to go to the hospital. Maybe he's got...
Okay, you're right, but why have the light on? Why have the light on?
What I hate is when I'm going to cross the street and I'm just about to see, okay, there's a good spot to go. All right, after this car, I can go. And then a taxi slows down and just completely messes up my traffic crossing mojo. I'm like, I'm not waiting for a taxi. I'm waiting to cross. Oh,
that's a very specific Bangkok thing, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll stop yelling.
All right, we want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get every episode a day early, behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, a heads-up to send questions to upcoming guests, and access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. On this week's bonus show, we chatted about Thailand's historic ruling that makes same-sex marriage legal, finally, a few quick addendums to my Hong Kong takeaways from last week, and a rant about 7-Elevens in Thailand and why the most convenient, ubiquitous shop in the whole country is also seemingly the only place that doesn't let you pay by scanning a QR code. So annoying. To learn how to become a patron and get all this good stuff, plus full access to over 700 bonus and regular back episodes, click the support button at the top of our website.
That's right. And as always, if you have a comment, a show idea, or just want to say hi, head to bangkokpodcast.com and click the little microphone button on the bottom right to leave us a voicemail that we'll play on the show, as we will do a little bit later in the show. So on this episode, we welcome back 2 of our favorite previous guests, authors Paul and Yuangrat Wedel. Now, you might remember them from Season 6, Episode 31, when they discussed their book, Radical Thought, Thai Mind, but they are back to talk about their new book, or should I say, books. In 2021, they released Beads on a String, a novel of ambition, revenge, love, and tragedy that takes place in southern Thailand during the tumultuous turn of the 20th century. And very recently, they released part 2 of the trilogy called Dark Karma, that continues their complex tale that mixes fiction with historical characters and real-life locations. We're very happy to have them back on the show to talk about how the story took shape and the research they did to bring the characters to life. We love chatting with these guys, 2 lovely and fascinating people. So here is part 1 of our conversation with Paul and Yuangrat Wedel. Well, we are very happy to welcome back to the show Paul and Yuangrat Wedel. You may remember them from a previous show we did on their one of their earlier books called Radical Thought, Thai Mind. And as prolific authors, they are back to talk about their new series of books, which is a really, really interesting discussion. So Paul and Yuangrat, welcome back to the Bangkok Podcast.
Thank you.
It's
Good to be back.
Yeah, we are sitting here in a room in downtown Bangkok. The aircon is blessedly on.
Yep.
And I think we're doing well. We might even be able to hear it in the background, but I think we're all right. So really quickly here. So you have come out with the second part of your ongoing series of books about Thailand in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, specifically Southern Thailand, and some families and political and dynastic intrigue.
Well, we should point out this is fiction.
It is a historical fiction. Is that the right way to?
Historical fiction
novel.
Yeah.
And as we always like to say, the historical part of it is as close as we can get to the existing record and to recollections of people.
Have either of you earlier in life written fiction, or is this a new thing? Or did you ever write short stories, novels, or anything like that before?
No, but we wrote a economic book, Radical Thought, Thai Mind.
Right.
That we also interviewed the ex-radical students who came back from the forest.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to, it was based on my thesis, but we tried to update it and also interview the red shirt and the yellow shirt. So a lot of interviews we're doing.
But this is technically your first foray into fiction.
Well, I wrote a novel when I was in college.
Oh, you did?
And I had it in my backpack when I was hitchhiking around Europe in 1970.
Wow.
And I left it in someone's car.
Oh, really?
And those were the days when all you had was the typescript, no backup.
Oh, no.
Maybe someone found it, published it, and made millions, and you don't even know anything about it.
I think, well, that would be interesting. But I always
young
look
punk
back.
named Salman Rushdie found it. And he's like, this is really good. I should be an author.
I think actually the reverse is probably good. It never saw the light of day. We'd be fighting back against that reputation.
Well, I've always said that reading is not something I have time to do these days, but I did buy this book and I had a few days off recently and I'm about a third of the way through. I really wanted to get it finished before we did the interview, but I'm sorry, I am only through the way through. But I got to say, and I'm not blowing smoke, it is really goddamn good. I'm really, really enjoying it.
Thank you.
First of all, it's way hornier than I thought. There's a lot of sexy stuff in there.
Well, it's a family story, a family saga. And as we tend to say, you can't have families without sex.
That's right.
That is true.
Right. That's right. So talk a little bit about the book and why you chose this time and place in Thailand to write about and what like how it all came together and why you decided to
Let me start, then I'll send it over to you.
I will add on if you miss something.
First of all, the end of King Chulalongkorn's regime is actually critical to understanding what Thailand is going through today. At that time, he completely revised the governing system of the country, centralized power in Bangkok, and removed the traditional rulers in the outlying provinces. This was particularly acute in Pattani, where the Sultan was seen as the center of legitimate power, and then he was removed. How did that happen? How did it affect people? These were interesting questions. But even places like Nakhon Si Thammarat had a king until the middle of the 19th century. And in that province, in Songkhla, they were replaced by centrally appointed governors and administrators who were there to carry out the will of the king in Bangkok. So how did that change things? The other side of it was that because of this centralization, more people from the central Thailand, other areas of Thailand, came to the south at the same time that Chinese migration was reaching a peak, and thousands of Chinese were coming into the country, while unrest in Burma was sending refugees from Burma, particularly the minorities such as Mon. And the existing Malays were trying to deal with this pressure from the center to conform. And we thought of this in the sense of, what does it mean to be a Thai?
Yeah.
Does it mean that you're a royalist, conservative, central Thai? Or is there room in the definition of Thai for the Malays and the Mons and the Chinese? So we were trying to show through fiction that, the idea of what it means to be a Thai is actually very complicated. Now, fortunately, for our storytelling, Yuangrat's family actually combines all these ethnicities. She has 4 grandparents, a Mon, a Thai, a Chinese, and
Malay.
Wow.
Which is according to
that's
the
amazing.
characters that we try to. I'm trying to say the story was inspired by my ancestors. That how Pakdi was my grandfather who ruled Surat Thani, Monthon, right? And then my grandmother from my mother's side was from Pegu, Hong Savadi, Mon.
Wow.
And then my father's father from Burma who owned the barge, the boats, big boats.
not from
commercial
Burma,
boats.
from China.
From China.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then ethnic Thais
And your
Roy,
mother's
who
mother.
owned the gambling,
Oh,
then.
okay.
which is very based on what's happening in that period.
Your grandmother owned the gambling den. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's ploy in the story.
Yeah,
Right.
Wow.
right.
Wow.
So we took this as a starting point, but then let our imaginations kind of
Yeah.
run wild with the story and looked at both these basic characters and how they would have reacted to the political, social, economic challenges of
Right.
that time.
And you grew up in the South. Is that's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
I was from Surat, and then we moved to Nakhon, educated in Nakhon from primary 1 through high school. Yeah.
wow.
All the whole family.
So this
My
you're-
family is still in Surat,
really, I was happy to see Kanal mentioned in the book, which is one of my
Kanal.
one of my favorite
Yeah,
places. I always say it
seaside.
wrong. I don't mean snack. I mean Kanal. Is that the right tone?
That's right.
Anyway, it's one
Kanal,
of
right.
my favorite villages
Yeah.
in Thailand. I really love it down there.
Yeah.
I've noticed that when people talk about the Thai South, a lot of people, especially foreigners, think it's just homogenous, or they think like, oh, that's the Muslim part of
Yeah.
Thailand. But luckily, over the years, I mean, since I've been here so long, I've learned how mixed it is. And I remember our buddy Stu, who's the polyglot, I happened to watch a YouTube video of his where he was in Phuket, and he apparently there's a Phuket dialect, like there's like a Phuketese, and he was doing a language thing on just the Phuket
Oh, wow.
language, and I was like, oh my God.
Southern Thai
Yeah.
has its own dialect.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know,
นั่นแหละ
Each
ต้อง
province
แรงภาษาเป็นเรานะต้องแรงพันนี้แหละ
And the southern
That's one of the
Surat
things I learned when I was
is
in the
different
South.
than
Oh,
Nakhon,
Ah.
different than Stone, Yala. They're all different.
But they're only
Accent.
slightly different.
No,
The
a
big
lot.
difference is between the South and Bangkok.
sure.
And
Sometimes,
there
yeah.
are tone changes. There maybe 20% of the vocabulary is different. And then some words are the same, but the meaning is a little
Yeah,
different.
Right. Right.
Like
Yeah.
batsi,
but see,
which means
a lot of jargons in each province. Yeah.
Right. So for this interview, I thought it'd be interesting. As I was reading the book, I'm highlighting certain phrases and passages in the Kindle that I find particularly interesting or that I want to talk about. So I thought maybe we could just go through some of these and maybe have you read them, Paul, and then we can talk about them because they sort of popped the question in my mind about this. So the one theme that I got from the book so far, and again, I'm only about a third of the way through, is this was just such a radical time of change in Thai culture. In technologically, culturally, religion, internationally, economically, globally, there's just all these new unions and things being formed. So it was just such a massive time of change. So maybe you could read that little section there, and it talks a little bit about how they're adapting to these things.
we are now doubly colonized, U Hun Tin said. The Burmans crushed our king almost a century and a half ago. They banned the use of the Mon language. Even today, the Burmans undermine our language and customs, while the British monopolize political power and control the economy. We have to contend not only with our old Burman enemies, but also with the Indian and Chinese bloodsuckers getting favorable treatment.
Yeah. So things are changing all over the place. So I can see why this was such an interesting time. But let's talk about that a little bit more. I mean, the British were in Thailand, the French were fighting. I don't have a really
Vietnam,
deep understanding of all of the regional geopolitics that was going on at the time. But what was happening in Thailand? You mentioned earlier the king was sort of changing how things worked. Like, what was the psyche of the Thai people at the time?
Well, an interesting thing is how they thought they should meet those challenges from the colonizing powers that had these weapons of war and armies and a keen interest in the economies of the region. And that pressure was keenly felt by King Chulalongkorn, and the centralization of the Thai bureaucracy that we mentioned a bit earlier was a direct result. He thought that was necessary to fend off the colonizers. At the same time, young members of the royal family were being sent to Britain and Germany and France to
get
be educated.
Sure.
And they saw that challenge almost from the inside and were working pretty hard to fend off by non-military means, by showing, one, that Thailand was a real country, or actually I should say Siam was a real country, that it had an effective administration, that it was modernizing, and that there was room in the economy for businessmen from Britain and France. And we talked a little bit about the motivations for that. But particularly in the South, the challenge was that Thailand had, or Siam had, traditionally exerted influence and extracted tribute from the sultanates that are now Southern Thailand and Malaysia. But the British were interested in those places too and had established protectorates over many of those little fiefdoms. And the Thai king was worried that all the Malay provinces would become British.
Right. I guess I was going to ask, I probably should know this, but were those provinces ever officially part of British Malaysia?
No.
No, they were never
it was
officially.
part of Thailand historically, because in the past, you know that the Thai kings, they rule the country by the conquer, right? You are strong. And the way to show that they are colonized by Thai, they just colonized, but in fact just paying the tribute each year to show that they are submitted to Bangkok, but nobody else. But they cannot resist against the central administration. They have to obey the laws. Right? That's been practiced not only in the South at that time, also in Cambodia and Laos, which we didn't mention at all because it's not in in the Southern history. And the Thai kings, not only king of the fifth, the sixth, because they were educated abroad in Europe, Germany, and Russia too. So they see that the ways to really keep our independence is to willingly sacrifice some parts of the country. So the king sacrificed the 4 provinces to British rule, Kelantan, Tanu, Yala, and Songkhla.
Okay.
And Laos to British, and some part of Cambodia to Vietnam.
I was going to say you also saw that in the north,
at the same time,
with Indochina.
So they were officially under British rule.
No, those all those sultanates were semi-independent. Some of them submitted to British protection, which meant a British advisor was placed in the Istana, the ruling palace, and advised. But that advice had a lot of power behind it, not just military power, but economic power. So that was a deal that some of those sultans did to maintain a semblance, at least, of their independence.
Right.
But the Patani Sultan did not. And that became an issue. And as you go through the book, you'll see how the Thais worked to shore up their control of Patani. And Patani also included the provinces of Narathiwat, Satun, and so on. The deal that was eventually done between the British and the Thai king was officially signed, I think, in 1904, and
agreement
that
made
the boundary clear, so that the people of those four southern provinces could not go to the British for protection, and the British would respect Thai sovereignty over those four, and in return got all the other Malay sultanates.
Okay.
No, this is going back to your point about Thai identity.
Yeah.
I wonder if at this time in the early 1900s, would the average person down there, would they identify as Thai? Would they say, I am Thai? Or would they say, I am Malay? Or maybe sometimes they have a regional identity, like they might just locally identify themselves. Because I know some people up north, they think of themselves as Northern.
Or Lana.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think the identity was for people down there?
Very ethnically oriented.
Oh, so someone might say, I am Man.
First of all, Thai was a language and an ethnicity, not a political identity.
Yeah.
Or
that only happened. It became one 37 years later.
Okay.
Historically, we are a very unified country. We are 90% Buddhist.
Right.
And then we speak Thai as a central language. At the same time, we allow the ethnic groups, like the one near the Laos speak Laotian, the North speaks Northern dialect Lana. But we have a central language, Thai. Officially, when you go to Thai school, you have to use Thai language, textbook and spoke and lecture and all that.
But in terms of identity,
well, if we're talking about 1900,
right? Yeah,
the Malays would have identified themselves as citizens of Patani,
citizens of Patani,
and ethnic Malays.
Ethnic Malay.
Chinese still thought of themselves as Chinese, and
a lot of Chinese today. It's funny. I have a good friend who is Chinese Malay, and his family is from down south.
Yeah.
I'll try to figure out. So his family is non-Muslim, but quite wealthy Southern family. So I'll figure it out. But you might have heard of the family name. I'm not sure. But he said that when he goes down to visit his family down there, they call themselves Chinese.
Yeah.
Even today, like they're Thai. They're 100% Thai.
There was some subtle answer to that because of the king's policy. I think we are pretty successful on the policy of assimilation. If you comparatively to Indonesia or Burma, we allow the Chinese to own land after they lived in Thailand for a while and give them the nationality.
Yeah.
In Indonesia, no matter how long you stay, you are Chinese, you never be able to change your nationality. It means you cannot own the land. Even in Burma, they don't allow the Indian to dress in their national costume. Right?
Oh, really?
But in Thailand, we are very flexible. We are practical. So we know that by giving them nationality, they have the right like a Thai citizen. So the Chinese so proud to be Thai.
Right.
They even changed their last name. I'm Chinese, by the way. I'm Sai Lau.
1/4.
Right.
Sai Lau. So I changed my last name to Pattanapong, which is after my grandfather, Prat Som Pat. So
talking about Thai practicality, it's something I want to read here. Paul, maybe you could read this next quote about this.
According to Father, the Siamese king's approach to the aggression of the foreign devils was far more clever. The white ghosts just want to make money. If you stop them from making money, they'll want to take over the whole country. Look at Burma, Laos, and Annam, he lectured. So the Siamese king lets them make some money, gives them a few bits and pieces of outlying territory, but never gives them a chance to take over.
Yeah, that seems to me that several of our guests over the recently and over the past history of the podcast have commented on the ties, how practical they are. And we talked about that in World War II. Just before we started recording, we were talking about in World War II, how they never officially declared war, because
they tried.
They tried. Right. They tried, but there was still someone who was like, maybe this isn't the best thing to do. So it's interesting. So back in the book, there's definitely a really interesting sort of intrigue around the practicality of ties and how they navigate this turbulence.
Yeah, when you get into book 2, Dark Karma, you'll see the theme of Chinese assimilation, it was not a smooth road to assimilation. There were bumps along the way, and many of the Chinese organizations were outlawed. The Thai king badmouthed the Chinese as the Jews of the East,
right,
and saw them
Because
as money grubbers. But at the same time, the Thais were practical enough to allow them to establish businesses, to really start the mining industry, and very importantly, as an economic counterbalance to the British. The Thais were smart enough to realize that if anybody was going to seize control of the economy, they would lose political control. So they tried to make sure the British were balanced by the Chinese.
And talking about practicality again, in our book, Pak Di was asked by his major wife to marry to the Chinese daughter, who has many daughters, in order for economic reason, so that he can be supported, rich and all that, and become friends with the rich Chinese families. And even now, if you can see the royal family are very practical. If you trace back all the billionaire in Thailand, owner of the Bangkok Bank, Rojana, is married to the Thai aristocrats, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Because to integrate, and nothing better than become relatives, right?
Yeah, it's sure. It's funny because I did have another quote in here that I wanted to read, but then I took it out because I figured the quote was about it was Susa's colleagues talking about, one of the characters is named Susa, and her colleagues were trying to guide her on which suitor to choose based on how much land he owned and what his family was like. And I thought that was interesting. But then I thought, well, I mean, every place is like that. Even today, you're like, well, this guy's really rich, I'm going to marry him. But maybe we can talk. I should not have cut it out because there's a deeper level to it in this time in the book too. There was the religion, the ethnicity, the background, and it wasn't just about he's rich and can supply me with a comfortable life. It was, it was power, it was connections, it was family, it was building a legacy. Much more complicated, it seems, than it is today, which is usually just about money.
And it was about ethnicity and culture, because at that time, the Mon culture was kind of in retreat. The Mons had once controlled all of Burma and much of Thailand, what is now Thailand. But with the rise of the Burman ethnics, and then later the takeover by the British, they were now a rather powerless and challenged minority. And Susa is a Mon, and she's really looking to marry a Mon. And she had a choice, if you remember, in the book. And I think she made the right choice. But
no spoilers.
And I won't say what that right choice is.
Speaking about changing names, which you mentioned a few minutes ago, maybe you could read this next one, Paul, here too. This was also a quote from someone about names, because I'm like I said, I'm only a third of the way through the book, and already 3 major characters have changed their names. Which is something that we still see today. Ed and I have talked about that. We've both worked with people who have just randomly one day changed their names. So, Paul, maybe you could read that quote there.
Okay, this is a quote from one of 2 brothers who play important roles in the book, one named Huot. And they have a Chinese father and a Thai mother. And and Huat is talking about his mother. I don't think she was ever happy with our Chinese names, Huat said. She always had Thai nicknames for us. But Father wouldn't let her use them when he was around and wouldn't register them with the district office. He wanted us to be as Chinese as possible. He even talked about sending us back home to learn to be a proper Chinese man and to find a Chinese wife. I was never sure what to call myself, Chinese name or Thai nickname. Nicknames are one thing. Everyone has them, Huat said. But with Chinese names, the Thais see us as foreigners, as chinks.
Yeah, so it's a kind of harsh word there, but it was like you said, Yuangrat, that there was a real practicality to changing your name to a Thai name, and wasn't it required? Like at a certain around this time, it was made the law.
There's a part in the book where the two half Chinese brothers have to register a last name. Actually, everyone in Thailand has to register a last name. And that became the opportunity for them, along with, well, who won't give the
no spoilers.
What happens to the father, but they felt free to become more Thai.
Yeah. Like I said that because they feel that being Thai, they belong to Thailand. They want to have some rights like a citizen.
Sure.
Now, I haven't had a chance to start the book yet, but in the midst of this is also Muslim culture or Muslim identity. Does that play a role in the story? Or
very much.
Oh, it does. Okay. So there's
again,
religion.
It's hard to talk about it without giving things away.
Well, in addition to all these ethnicities, there's just religious stuff going on too.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
and we have one character that kind of shows the conflict, because he knows that to get ahead in the royal bureaucracy, he has to convince everyone he's Thai, but he's actually Malay.
Yeah, and that's another really surprising element of this book as I'm going along. I'm just getting to the part. I assume you're talking about Pakdi, and where he's doing some stuff, and it seems to me to be getting into sort of some espionage almost work, which I wasn't expecting, but it's really interesting.
You're making me want to read the book for sure.
But that's the purpose.
Right.
Man, I got to say, these two they have to be two of the easiest people to interview. Like, they're just interesting people. They have a lot to say. They just carry the conversation, and you and I can just kind of sit back and like bask in their experience.
Yeah, those are always the best conversations, right? Like, even if the microphones weren't there, you'd still want to sit down and have the exact same conversation with them, right?
But there's no, there's no pulling information out from them. They just have interesting stuff to talk about, whether it's fictional, historical, or from their own life, like how they learned all this stuff. So just super easy people to interview, and they're welcome back on the show anytime.
Yeah, they're one of a short list of people that have an open invite to come on whenever. So you'll be happy to hear that I'm still slowly making my way through the first part of their trilogy, and I'm still enjoying it. It's a really, really interesting book. I really do like it, and it's one of these things. Like, I think us in our little Bangkok bubble up here, and even within that, the Farang bubble inside the Bangkok bubble, I think a lot of people don't really know a lot about the South. And there's a lot of people that do, but I don't know a lot of them.
That's right. Yeah. I think we mentioned that a little bit in the interview. And then you and I also went to hear them speak at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand,
right?
Introducing this book. So we talked about some of these issues. But it's just fascinating that you have the fictional component, which of course is not easy to do. It's not easy to write a novel that's pure fiction, but then to somehow combine it with actual history and get your facts right on the history, especially about a place as complex as the Southern Thailand, which has just multiple cultural influences.
Right.
That is not easy to do.
No, it's not, and they do it. They do a very good job of it, and they make it very believable. And of course, a lot of it is based on Yuangrat's relatives and ancestors who did the things that the characters do in the book. So it's based in a very real reality. Even though some of the things might not have happened, a lot of the characters and places are all based on
Right.
people and places that do or did
Sure.
exist. So,
Yep.
yeah, great book. Love talking to them. So thank you, Paul and Yuangrat, and come back next week when we will get into part 2.
For sure. For sure.
All right. Well, we ask our listeners to send us a voicemail using the little microphone button on our website if they have something to say. And this week we heard from our pal, Joe Pilato. Joe, take it away.
Okay, this is going to make me sound like a professional level creep, but in response to the massage girls saying handsome man, I didn't mind that when I was in Bangkok. Obviously, it gets a little repetitive, but now I live in a different city with sex workers on the street, and they just say massage. And, not to belittle their work, it's a hard job. It's not a job that I can do, but I do want to pull them aside. And like you said, be like, listen, there are more things you could say. There are more, even just calling the men handsome is going to up your numbers by a little bit, at least, probably. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe they're better at their jobs than I am. Entirely unrelated, I do appreciate the cremation of Sam McGee reference, Greg. I actually have that poem memorized. So if I ever come to town, I'll perform it for you and what I'm sure will be many baffled Thai people.
Dude, man, he agrees with you that these girls need some game.
Yeah, like it might not be a family-friendly thing, but these places do exist, and these women are trying to make a living. And what they do is they sort of try to catch your attention by yelling, "Massage, handsome man, massage." And Joe agrees with me, man. You got to come up with a better sales pitch. And I think for the world's oldest profession, I think it demands a more stringent, effective promotional tool.
Agreed. So maybe this can be a little sideline for you. You can be kind of a marketing consultant for these girls. You got a future. You got a future in that.
That's right. I gotta come up with like the one phrase that's just gonna cross all socioeconomic barriers and appeal to the broadest.
I think you need to put together a seminar, like a PowerPoint, like
Right,
make it like
right.
a Saturday day-long thing, like include lunch, and then just go sign girls up.
I'm telling you, a girl jumps out in front of the sidewalk in front of me and says, "How's it going, Big Daddy? You look like the kind of guy that knows how to party. How about you and me head over to the corner and talk business?" Like, I think that's a bit more compelling than massage.
Well, you and Joe are definitely on the same page. No doubt about
We should
that.
get together. And thanks for the shout out for my poem to Joe. It's impressive that you got that cremation of Sam McGee memorized. That's a long one. I think I'm starting a parallel poetry podcast. Maybe me and Joe can team up on that. The next one I'm going to do is the only other poem that I've got memorized, which is Invictus by William Ernest Henley, which I will do everyone a favor by not reading now. So
Yeah,
anyway.
I think we need to move on. Let's just move on.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. All right, a final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping in our never-ending quest for cool content. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Faux show. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail through our website like we just did. And you can hit me up on threads at PKK Greg. Thank you for listening, everyone. Take it easy out there. Stay cool. See you back here next week.